20 years ago, the Women's Manifesto for Ghana was launched, marking a pivotal moment in the struggles for gender equality and women's rights in Ghana. Today, we revisit the manifesto, asking the key questions. How far have we come? What victories have we won? And what challenges still persist on this journey to true equality? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gender Watch podcast, brought to you by the Aya Institute of Women, Politics and Media. I'm Regina Bolibote, and at this moment, I'm pleased to introduce our guest for this conversation. She is Portia Owusu Amwating, a staff of Abantu for Development with the Programs Department, and also serves as a secretary to the Secretariat of the Women's Manifesto Coalition. Welcome, Portia.
Thank you very much, Regina.
Okay, I always find it a very pleasant experience when I find young women like yourself in this sector, because it tells me that we're learning from our seniors and we are prepared to take over. And so I find it very encouraging. And I am excited that you are representing Abantu for Development for this particular conversation about the Women's Manifesto for Ghana. I heard about the manifesto way back when I was in level 200. And it was intriguing for me. Women's Manifesto, what is it about? And I'm sure you had the same questions the very first time you heard about the Women's Manifesto for Ghana.
Yeah, so on campus, that was the first time I heard of the manifesto. And I was into student politics as the USAC treasurer, University Students Association of Ghana. And on the local campus, I was also the local NUC secretary. So through the WUCOM NUCs, Abantu used to come and train students on politics, women in politics. So that's how I got to know the manifesto on campus.
And I don't know if you manifested, I have to work with Abantu for Development, because here you are today representing Abantu.
Yes.
Okay, so for the purposes of education and for those who are watching and listening to us, tell us the history behind this groundbreaking document, the Women's Manifesto for Ghana.
Okay, so, after independence, there were still needs, there was still discrimination, there were still women needs and concerns and disparities. So the whole idea started in 2003, and when there was that need to get that a representation and a reflection of what women's concerns are as citizens of the country. So there were engagements with key stakeholders, somewhere in 2004, community leaders, the traditional leaders, women CSOs, just to get to know what is important with respect to the needs of women in Ghana. And so the document, the Women Manifesto, it's more like a consolidated resolution that represents the interests, the concerns,
the aspirations,
and the demands for addressing women needs in Ghana.
Okay, yeah. That's a good background to how we came about this document, the Women's Manifesto for Ghana. What is the Women's Manifesto for Ghana? What is in this document?
Great. So as I shared earlier, the history, after the engagements with these key stakeholders, it was very necessary to get, administratively, there were committees that were set up. So the steering committee, which was led by Madam Hilary Bedema, and the drafting committee was led by Professor Amata Edu, just to make sure that, yes, the book contains the interests of women and the concerns. And so in here, we have 10 thematic areas of concerns when it comes to women needs in Ghana. So we talk of women and economic empowerment, women and land issues, women in the media space, women in politics and decision making, the challenges that they go through, the concerns that women have, some of our cultural practices that are not so friendly with women. We talk of institutions that have that mandate to promote women's rights. So the document lists all those concerns and the demands and how stakeholders are supposed to follow in addressing.
Right. So let's talk about the manifesto in detail. What is contained in this document? I do know that it's modeled after the Beijing Platform for Action, and it has been localized to fit the Ghana situation. In 2004, what were the aspirations of Ghanaian women that culminated in us having the Women's Manifesto? If you could take us through the thematic areas one after the other, and then let us understand the demands that were made by women 20 years ago.
Okay, so Regina, before I go into that detail, I just want to show, I have two documents of the manifesto here, and this is the original edition. This was what was launched in 2004, the first edition that has all the 10 thematic areas, and this was launched after years. So many things changed. There were progresses. Despite the fact that some of the demands with timelines were still not met, but there were progresses. So that informed the revision for the second edition, which was published in 2016. So there were it's still happening. We still know and we still see low women representation in leadership and decision making. So some of the concerns were women participation in politics and decision making, low representation in local governments. And so women participation in politics and decision making, the ratio has always been not equalized. We have a larger percentage of the men in politics and decision making, and those were the concerns.
Okay, I'm trying to understand, and I think I do, that the background for this thematic aspiration back then, and like you're saying, it hasn't really changed that much, because if you look at our parliamentary composition, we have just about 40 women out of 275 MPs, and that's woefully inadequate. It's below the threshold of 30% for international conventions and all the things we've ratified and signed onto as a country. So I'm guessing that was why this was put in the manifesto, that as women, this is what we are aspiring to. As a country, this is what we're aspiring to. We want to have some semblance of equal representation.
Sure. Yes, so like you just mentioned, as at now, we still have less than 15% of women. After all the awareness creation and the need to engage women in leadership, the sensitization and all that, we are still not having the demand of 30%, representation of women in governance still met. So still throwing the emphasizing how critical the document is. Former President Mills, may he so rest in peace, in 2005 also commented on how crucial the document is and the role it plays in addressing the critical issues and concerns women go through.
So we've established why it was necessary for that particular theme to be contained in the Women's Manifesto, women's participation in decision-making and politics. But at the time, there were other issues that women felt were necessary to be amplified, which found expression in this Women's Manifesto, right?
Sure. Yes. So a lot of them, but then because of time, so maybe I would like to read few on women and land. And some of the issues were with marriage and land rights, and land tenure reforms. And on the marriage and land rights, we talk of how women are only entitled to access to land because of maybe your marriage, and maybe after losing your spouse, how you are not given that access, sort of. Yes. So that concerns were all captured under marriage and land rights, practical issues with respect to that, and land tenure reforms. And then after that, it gives the demands. And you know that prior to this, there was already a first edition. And so the second edition also looked at the progress that have been made after the first document was published.
Okay, we'll talk about the progress and achievements in this regard. So let's just focus on the demands and then we can get to that.
Okay.
And it's interesting you're mentioning that there was that call for some form of reforms that will allow women own land and be able to use the land they own the way in which they see fit. Because these issues still persist as we speak. 20 years on, there are issues with land ownership, especially for women in agriculture. So and I'm listening and I'm like, why hasn't so much changed 20 years on? But like you're saying, there have been some progress and we'll get to that. Was there any mention about women's economic empowerment in this Women's Manifesto?
Under the women economic empowerment, there were issues with respect to the economic team not having women representation, economic growth through the Structural Adjustments Program, the SAP, the HIPIC initiative, the GPRS, and the GSDPGA. All these are explained in detail in the documents. And so these were the concerns that the committees they gathered from women, and they captured them under the thematic area Women and Economic Empowerment.
Okay.
Demands.
And it was basically geared towards ensuring some empowerment of women as far as the economy is concerned. Because tell me this, how intertwined is economy to the well-being of a woman? And I'm asking this with stories about domestic violence in mind, where people say that women cannot leave abusive homes because they are thinking about my economic well-being if I leave, and the man who is seen as the breadwinner, of my home, I'm leaving without anything, and so I cannot fend for myself if I leave. So I have to stay within this abusive marriage. How important is that economic theme?
Yeah, because economic empowerment for women is very crucial. In years back, women basically dependent on their husband for everything. And so that's the case that when you're in an abusive marriage, because you really don't have a job, maybe you don't have that empowerment to start something on your own, for the fear of you not having any financial dependency, you still stay in marriages that abuse women. So economic empowerment is very crucial. When we are able to help women build skills that they are able to make living, life skills to get into activities that will give them something like earn them a living. All those things makes them independent.
Okay.
And then if they enter into toxic relationship, the fear of you not having any financial dependency wouldn't keep you stuck.
Okay.
Because you have something that you can do with your hand. Yeah, so it makes economic empowerment very crucial.
Okay.
And as it's captured also in the document.
In the Women's Manifesto. Sure. Talk to us about the theme on harmful cultural practices. Of course, now is outlawed FGM, but back in the day, FGM was very rampant. We had systems like trochasy. All those had harmful effects on the very women who were victims of it. What was the aspiration as was captured in the Women's Manifesto as relates to harmful cultural practices?
Okay.
If you could quote some of them for us.
I would like to make the reference. Like you mentioned, and there were also female genital mutilation. Those were barbaric acts that took women through a lot of pain, young girls, and with the health issues, the accompanying health issues that women had to go through, young girls had to go through as a then. So I'd like to read. So the use and abuse of culture in relation to women, marriage, the culture, marriage, family and community life, the cultures attached to that. I would like to make a practical example, share a practical story. When my father died, my mother had to go through some cultural widowhood rights. They have to take some substances. The health concerns was not, taken into consideration. They just bring you this concoction and they say you should take it, even in the 21st century. And so there were so many cultures back then that women had to suffer significantly because our society demanded that of them. So like genital mutilation, they claimed that it was to make the woman
less
promiscuous.
Yeah.
that yes, so that the woman won't be promiscuous to cure. I mean, the issue of promiscuity. So they have to do those things to you so that the woman will stick to the husband, and all those were unfriendly cultural practices that women were going through. And then also we should also have in mind that all these concerns are things that, after democracy, there was a need to consolidate democracy for everyone, gender equality. Everybody is supposed to benefit from what we're fighting for. So if women after independence are going through all these things by virtue of culture, there is not a safe space. It's not an environment that promotes equality. And so that is the reason why that section was also looked into and captured into the document.
Okay. Portia, how do you feel hearing so many people say they do not know about the Women's Manifesto for Ghana, knowing how important this document is in the grand scheme of gender equality and the conversations around women's rights in the country?
I think it's very strange because with respect to accessibility, we've been disseminating the documents to policy influencers, to government officials, to academia, even at the University of Ghana. I know that the social science department and humanity use it as a teaching material.
Oh, okay.
And so there is that access. And also to talk of the revision, a lot of, after 2016, a lot of things that have happened. And so we are in that process, the third edition.
Oh, so there'll be a third edition of the Women's Manifesto?
Yes.
Okay.
And there are plans. Plans are already in place to make sure that a lot of people have access. But then with respect to accessibility and dissemination, I think it's out there. And the document it's in 4 different dialects.
Okay.
Yes, so that, inclusivity, other people that may not be okay with the English language can also have access to the manifesto in their dialect. So the Secretariat is working so hard. It's a good one. And the feedbacks are well, taken in good faith.
Okay.
And so
I like that attitude because it means that if they didn't care about it, they wouldn't be bothered answering a question about it. So it gives you an inkling that, okay, this is what's happening. Maybe we have to do this, do that. So I like that. And I'm happy about the fact that there's a third edition that's in the works. Because, and this question is about progress and achievement. How far have we come since 2004 when the Women's Manifesto for Ghana was launched? What achievements, notable ones, can you mention?
So many of them. But tangibly, we can talk of the passage through the manifesto, the passage of the Domestic Violence Act in 2007, and criminalizing that practice, female genital mutilation, in the the amendment of the Constitution, Criminal Act. And also, we can also talk about the spousal bill with respect to the land and all those things. And also, we can look at the just recent affirmative action that was now an act in 2004. So those are tangible progress that the manifesto, so many, we even have now, by virtue of this, the awareness and sensitization. We are seeing most of the banking sectors, the CEOs being women. We've also had our 2 electoral commissions as women. We've also had an attorney general as a woman. Though the progress I said is slow, but we cannot also completely ignore that these are, things that has to be credited. We've had 3 female chief justices, and I think that those are some of the progress. 20 years, the manifesto.
Okay, so 20 years is a long time, but of course we have to acknowledge where we've come from and where we are now. And you mentioned the affirmative action and gender equity law, which was passed in July this year. I do know that Abantu for Development, which hosts the Women's Manifesto Coalition, was very instrumental in getting the affirmative action law passed. Does it host the affirmative action coalition?
Yes, we do. Abantu hosts the affirmative action coalition. And yes, as the host, we have the secretariat at the office. So media engagement, press releases, and everything just to sensitize people on the need to have that legal backing and the things that we're already doing to empower women and also to achieve gender equality. So often the coalition is hosted by Abantu.
Pasha, it's been 20 years since the first edition was launched. In 2024, do you believe that the Women's Manifesto is still relevant in addressing the challenges facing Ghanaian women?
So I don't know if you've had the chance to or the time to go through the manifestos of the political parties this year. But then, like I mentioned, dissemination, most of the political parties reached out to the secretariat for a copy of the document, and it influences their manifesto, the political party manifestos, with regards to issues with women. And so 20 years, yes, but it's still relevant because some of the demands, as I shared earlier, have still not been met.
Okay.
We had timelines allocated to them, but some of them have not been met. So it's still relevant because this captures as far as women are concerned, the things that are important to them. So I would say that it's still relevant in 2024.
Are there any implementation gaps that as a secretariat you've identified as far as the Women's Manifesto is concerned? Or are there challenges that you can mention with the hope of improving so that the purpose for which this document was produced will be achieved fully?
Sure. Before the challenges, just to say that there are still, good things that are happening, but then there's still the challenge with political challenges, cultural challenges, social challenges, the stereotypes. When people get to hear of this, the misconception that in Ghana we are trying to overpower or overshadow the men in Ghana. So there is that challenge of the cultural barriers.
Okay.
So the cultural challenges. So we use this also in our training programs. So
training programs for who?
For our partners,
okay,
stakeholders, the community engagement projects that we engaged
okay.
in. And so I just came from a training workshop to build capacity of our partners on how to be gender responsive in nature-based solutions under climate change issues. And so speaking on cultural challenges, there is still that challenge in some of the communities. Abantu engages more with the grassroots. And in the rural areas, though progress have been made, as I shared, but there is still this, the patriarchal thing. And so the cultural challenge is there. That is also an issue. So, as I mentioned, with dissemination, the secretariat have been doing it, and we have plans to also make sure that other people get it on a wider range. But then also to say that the issue of cultural barriers, most of the Abantu projects that we do, we engage more with the grassroots community. So the rural communities, getting even the women, the structure is such that the men will not even allow the women to come.
For those engagements?
Yeah, but there's still that understanding. They come, there's progress, very tangible and good, significant progress. But then it's just to mention that it's still a challenge, the cultural thing. And politically, we are putting in measures and all that as a nation, but we still don't have that representation of women in the political sphere. So with regards to implementation, it's also a challenge, the political challenge that we are not having enough women, because women relate to this. And so if they find themselves in, high profile places, it makes implementation of the concerns here and how to address them very easier because they are women and they can relate to the concerns captured in the manifesto.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Portia, in wrapping up, as we look to the future, what lessons can we take from the past 20 years? Our past is important. our present is even more important, but we cannot forget the future. So, as we look to the future, what have we learned from the last 20 years that we can use in terms of improving the advocacy for women's rights in Ghana?
I just want to, before I answer, I just want to celebrate the likes of these women that, started the whole movement and the fight for gender equality in Ghana, which we are beneficiaries now. The girl child education thing, maybe some of us would have been still, in the kitchen or something, working on the streets.
You never know.
Yeah,
you never know what would have been.
Yeah, but for their intervention, the sensitization, the awareness creation on the need to empower our girls through education. Some of us have grown to become beneficiaries. So
I am a beneficiary.
Exactly. So lesson learned.
I actually thought you were going to mention some of these women.
Yeah, of course, Dr. Rose, Mr. Kutin, Auntie Amida, the whole women, Professor Amma Ataid, may so rest in peace. Hillary, Auntie Hillary Bedema, yes, Auntie Dorcas, a lot of them. Maybe if I start to appreciate all of them.
I get why you're saying auntie and auntie is a cultural Abantu for development.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But the likes of Rose Mensa Kuntu, Doctor, Executive Director for the Abantu for Development. Yeah. And I even think the convener for the Affirmative Action Coalition, Madam Sheila Menka Premo.
Yeah, just to celebrate all of them. All of us, all of them have worked. They worked so much to bring the issues of women this far. Just to say some of the lessons maybe I've appreciated. I've had, on behalf of Abantu, I've had the chance to sit in meetings where free space for the younger generation to interact with the older generation, to learn from them, to share ideas, the new contemporary issues. And I think that the power of intersectionality is very crucial for the future. That we integrating the younger generation to learn, so that we don't have to start afresh, recycle the whole thing, but picking up from where they ended, and working with them, the lessons they learned, so that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So the power of intersectionality is key for the future. Also, more sensitization and capacity building. We shouldn't get tired of this, because a lot of people, we just watched the video that people here in Accra still don't know of the manifesto. And so it tells us that it's a progressive something, so we shouldn't stop. More sensitization, awareness creation on the need to empower women, addressing gender equality issues, and because it also even have an impact on the country's economic development. And so the power of capacity building and sensitization, intersectionality, leveraging on technology. So now the whole thing is technology is ruling, and so it's also something that maybe it's a lesson that into the future we should make use of it. So
and disseminating the document. Okay. Well, where can people get copies of this document?
So it's on our website, the soft copy on Abantu, www.abantu. You can get that on the website. You can also I don't know if I should leave my contact or something, but you can reach out to the secretariat. It's opened. You just give a call. I would deliver, we deliver the hard copies in person. Like I shared, I just came from the training, and in one of the sessions, there was a talk on the manifesto, and partners expressed that they needed, you made them available for them. So
well, there are soft copies as well.
There are soft copies on the website. There are soft copies, there are hard copies.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Portia. So Portia Owusu Amwatin is with Abantu for Development. She's also the secretary at the Secretariat of the Women's Manifesto Coalition. We've been talking today about the Women's Manifesto for Ghana, launched 20 years ago in 2004, looking at how far we've come with that document. And you've heard her. She says that this document is important. In fact, it has served as the background to a number of progress and achievements made in relation to gender equality and women's rights. In wrapping up, I just have one advice, if I can call it that. Just make sure that you spend some time going through the Women's Manifesto for Ghana, because if you do, you understand the aspirations of the very women who form a larger part of Ghana's population. I'm Regina Boliboti. This has been the Gender Watch podcast. Thank you so much for your time.